So today I'm breaking down a video on the drawer. The reason why I want to do that is the bed build is probably going to be 35 minutes, and I think that there's some good information in the drawer here that might be just standalone. Let's go ahead and take a look at it, and I'll try to break it down. First, I want to talk about measuring for the drawer. These drawers are not going to have any kind of metal runners or glides. It's going to be wood on wood. So the first thing that you need to do is measure for your drawers. And the opening here is 25 and 5/16. So I'm going to make the drawer 1/8 of an inch smaller than the opening. That gives me 1/16 of an inch on each side. So I'll make it 25 and 3/16. For the depth of the drawer, it's usually the depth of the cabinet. Usually I'll subtract maybe 1/2 of an inch or an inch. So this cabinet is 31 inches deep, and I've made the depth of the drawer 30 inches deep. For the height of the drawer, you'll measure the height of the opening. In this case, it's 9 3/4, and you'll subtract 1/8 of an inch or maybe a heavy 16th. To get the length of the drawer front, and since I'm building the drawer with butt joints, you have to subtract 3/4 of an inch on each side, so that's 1.5 inches. And you'll take your opening minus 1/8 of an inch, which is 25 and 3/16, and you'll subtract the 1.5 inches, and that will leave you with 23 and 11/16. For the back of the drawer, I'm using 1/4 inch dado on each side. So I'll subtract only 1/2 of an inch from each side of the drawer. So I'll take my 25 and 3/16, subtract an inch, and that leaves me with 24 and 3/16. You might be wondering why I left so much material behind the back of the drawer. And I do that so the drawer doesn't fall out of the cabinet when you pull the drawer all the way out. So enough said, let's go ahead. I'm going to take the footage right out of the build. We'll build the drawer, and then I'll tell you what I plan on getting done this weekend in hopes to have this whole project wrapped up by next weekend. Okay, so now I've got all of my parts to the drawers cut. And this is one of those things that can be a little confusing, so definitely just take your time. And as the old saying goes, measure twice, cut once. I've got my drawer sides laid out here, my drawer fronts, and the backs I'll cut later. I also have some scrap wood, and I'll be making the same cuts in the scrap wood as I do in the drawers. And that way I can test my fit on the scrap wood first before I make the cuts in the drawers that I'll be using, or the material that I'll be using. So the first step is to raise the blade up 1/4 of an inch and then set the fence at 3/8 of an inch. I'll first make a pass on the scrap wood and then on the parts that I'm using for the drawers. Now that I've got a groove cut in my test piece and all of my parts, I've moved the fence over a little bit more than 1/16 of an inch. I'll take another pass and I'll test it on the 1/4 inch plywood that I'm using for the drawer bottom. And once I have a snug fit on the test piece, I'll run all the parts through the saw. Okay, so I got lucky on the first pass. That's a nice fit. You don't want it too snug because you don't want it to be difficult to put the drawer together, but at the same time you don't want it real sloppy. That's why I make a test piece. Since this works good, now I'll run the rest of the material through the saw. The next step is to cut a 3/4 inch dado for the backs of the drawers. I'll make one pass with a standard size blade on the test piece and then one pass on each side. Okay, so I've got a nice fit with the dado. I've set the fence, and next I'll make this cut, the outside cut on all the sides. And once I've made the outside cut on all the sides, I'll remove the rest of the material. The next step is to cut the back of the drawer to its finished width. And to get that measurement, you'll measure from the top of the drawer to where the groove for the bottom of the drawer begins. And in this case, it's 9 1/16, a little heavy. I'm using 1 5/8" trim screws to build the drawers. So the first step is to measure and mark where I'll need to pre-drill holes. I'm drawing a line 3/8 from the front of the drawer, and I'm splitting the dado in the back. Next, I'll measure down from the top of the drawer and mark 1.5 inches, 4, 6, and 8. And I'll do the same thing at the front of the drawer. 1.5 inches, 4, 6, and 8. Then I'll drill a hole at those marks, not a countersink, just a hole. First, I'll attach the side of the drawer to the front of the drawer. I'll hold the parts flush and tack it in place with 1.5 inch nail. The 3.5 inch nails will help keep everything in line while I attach the side of the drawer to the front of the drawer with 1 5/8" trim screws. Next, I'll add a little glue in the dado and then drop in the back. Here I won't need the 1.5 inch nails because the dado will hold it in place. And then I'll do the same steps for the other side of the drawer. Now I'll stand the drawer up on its front, add a bead of wood glue on the front groove towards the bottom, and then I'll drop the bottom of the drawer in the groove. Then I'll use a pencil and draw a straight line from dado to dado. Then shoot 1.25 inch nail about every 2 or 3 inches. And then for a little extra strength, I like to add a bead of hot glue at the bottom of the drawer and at the back. Now I'm ready to attach the drawer fronts to the drawers, and when I'm working with multiple drawers like this, I like to make a jig out of 1/4 inch plywood so I only have to measure once. Now I can reach into the drawer with my drill and countersink the hole. To make sure I have the same 1/2 inch reveal at the top of each drawer, I'm going to clamp a piece of 1/2 inch scrap wood and make sure it's flush with the top of the drawer. Then I'll rest the drawer front on the 1/2 inch scrap wood. Make sure I have the correct reveal on the side of the drawer. Clamp it in place and attach the drawer front with 4 1.25 inch screws. Okay, so that part of the drawer build was taken right out of the overall finished video. I'm breaking this project down because it's just so massive. I think the video will probably be maybe 35 minutes when it's all said and done. And I'm really hoping that anybody who decides to build this cabinet or something like it will be able to refer back to videos like I made today or the one I made last week on breaking down plywood and making a simple cabinet. Will be helpful when you go to build your project. So just a little bit of what I have to do this weekend to try to stay on schedule, and what I'll be doing today, because it's only 11 o'clock in the morning, is I will be taking off the drawer fronts, and I'll have to label them. It's really important to make lists and kind of check everything off when you're building a project like that or this. So I'll label everything, then I'll finish the inside and out of the drawers with water-based polyurethane. I'll finish the inside of the cabinet with 2 coats of water-based polyurethane. The top of the cabinet will be finished with water-based polyurethane. And then the front of the cabinet will be filled, primed, and sanded, and eventually painted. And that goes, that's the same step with the drawer fronts. And then there's a base. Both cabinets are going to sit on a 3-inch high walnut base. And the only part of the base that you're going to see is 3 inches by 82 inches. And so I have to sand that, stain it, and I'm going to finish that with water locks. And I think there's a couple other little accent pieces that I still have to make that will be walnut. And then I have to design and come up with a cut list for the footboard and the headboard. I have kind of a rough idea of what I'm going to do. I'm going to start drawing it out later. And so all these things have to get done. And I'm telling you this because with a big project like this, it's really important to make a list and then just kind of keep checking the little things off the list, and then eventually you finish the project, because a project like this can definitely be a little overwhelming. So especially if you don't have the ability to work on it every day. If this is something that you're doing on the weekends, it's really helpful to say, okay, this weekend if I can get this much done, then that'll get me there towards my goals. So as always, I really appreciate you guys tuning in, and it's one of my biggest inspirations is reading your comments, and I really do enjoy what I'm doing and having this interaction with you guys. So as always, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you soon. For a behind-the-scenes look at projects and in-depth Q&As, check out my Patreon page. For helpful tips and to keep up with projects on a daily basis, follow me at my Instagram and Facebook. Links are in the description.